I'm glad you decided to continue with me. Today I have a very interesting topic, something that I know will make you feel better about your learning experience. But before we do that, let's quickly review the things we have checked so far. In the last episodes, we talked about motivation, which means having a clear goal and the determination to do it. Very important. Then we discussed the great importance of listening and its role in our language acquisition. Listen, 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 we said. On the number 3, we learned that the natural companion of listening, if we really want to speak English naturally, is repetition, because in this way our brain can absorb the language. We also discussed how the use of context can help us understand more. And in the last episode, we talked about connecting the dots, which basically means using all the resources we have at hand to make our learning process more effective, more complete, and more fun. Singing in the shower and all that, remember? To explain today's topic, I'm using a very common expression in English that you might have already heard. Take it easy. This is so true about everything. There is but one life, full of great, amazing things. And sometimes we miss those things because we are so worried. Well, can we blame ourselves? Not really. We have a lot of concerns. We have jobs, school, obligations, family, all sorts of things. And it's natural that we get a little antsy about life. Should we add another worry to the list? Should we look at learning a new language as another thing to be worried and anxious about? No, we absolutely shouldn't. And not only because we already have a myriad things in our mind, but for practical, pedagogical reasons. Let me elaborate a little on that subject. As I mentioned earlier, mastering a new language is a really long activity. In fact, it's an activity that never ends. Don't get scared, alright? But this is true not only for a foreign language, but also for your native language. Think about it. We never really finish learning a language, because languages are so broad, so rich and so changing that we are learning new things almost every single day. There's always a new word, a new concept, or even a rule we don't know yet. When we are reading, for example, oftentimes we have to pay a visit to the dictionary because we came across a word that we didn't know existed. But when it comes to our native language, we are absolutely okay with it. We don't feel bad about not knowing something. In fact, we are almost glad and say things like, well, you learn something new every day. But for some reason, when it comes to learning a second language, we don't feel the same way. We are hurried. We are rushing to get all the language in a really short period of time, and we feel terrible if we make a mistake. But this is not your fault. The reason why we do it is because they have turned language into some sort of competition. We want to get the best scores in our exams. We want to speak perfectly, with no mistakes, because we are afraid that people might make fun of us. We are terrified that people might believe that we are not as intelligent as we know we are. And this puts a lot of pressure and stress in our mind. Now, for some people, having a little bit of stress is a good thing, because it makes them work more efficiently. As a matter of fact, for some jobs or activities, a certain amount of stress is even recommendable, but that is not the case for learning languages. In this case, the less stress you have, the better. In fact, if you have absolutely zero stress, your brain will be able to absorb more of the language than if you were worried. Because when we overthink, we place a barrier between our mind and the external messages, and in this way, we are preventing our mind from acquiring language at its full potential. But how can we actually relax ourselves when it comes to language learning? Well, it's easier said than done, but let's see what works best. Number 1, you need to stop looking at learning English as if it were a competition. I mean, who are you competing against? Is there a prize at the end? Do you have a deadline? If you don't speak English in the next 3 months, will you be a failure? Absolutely not. Language is not about performance. And I know that this is particularly frustrating if you are studying at a school, because they have exams at the end of each course, and if you don't get the score that they consider acceptable, you won't advance to the next course. But that's not how language works. Numbers, when it comes to language learning, don't mean a thing. So you need to stop worrying about scores. You can study really hard for an exam and get a perfect score, 100%. You move to the next course, but you can't use the language. In this case, your 100% shows one thing only, that you are really good at presenting exams. On the other hand, if you focus your attention on the language itself and you stop caring about grammar and structures, maybe you don't get a 100% score, but you can actually use the language. The reality is that exams are not important at all. Keep that in mind. Another really harmful thing that makes people really anxious when they are learning any language is the speaking part. It's traditionally and almost universally accepted that in order to prove our skills with the language, we need to speak. I told you at the beginning of this course how some schools force their students to have speaking exams after as few as 2 weeks of classes. Do you have any idea of the mental burden that represents in a student's mind? It's brutal. We need some time to gain not only the language itself, but confidence. It's like if you were studying medicine for 1 semester and after that they force you to perform a real operation in front of every person you know. You would probably screw up, and this would have a tremendous negative impact in your future learning. This is not how things works. We need time. On the principle number 2, I told you about the silent period. When I was learning French, do you know how long it took me to start speaking? Almost a year. And it's not that for 365 days I couldn't say a word in French, but I didn't have to. I wasn't dragged to it. I never had to show anybody that I could use the language. For 1 complete year, I was only listening, watching movies and TV shows, reading, and not saying a word in French. I didn't need anybody's approval or their telling me that my French was in level A or B or C or D. When the opportunity came, I started speaking naturally, without stress, because I knew exactly the words that I wanted to use, because I was not exposed, because I was completely relaxed. Maybe a year is too much for you, I get it. But what I'm trying to say is that you, and only you, should decide when you want to start speaking, or reading, or writing, or whatever. If you really analyze this, the problem with the stress and the pressure lays on the school system. They have a method, a calendar, and there is no time to go back on things. There are no possibilities for adapting it. But you can certainly adapt it. It is your language after all. You need to find your own pace. If the class is going too fast, you don't have to keep up with the rest of the class. Everybody's different, everybody's unique, and that is why having great material comes in handy. If you are in a class and they are having an activity with a video or a conversation, maybe you didn't get it the first time, and they will not play it again. But if you have the material at your disposal, you can watch it or listen it as many times as you want or need until you get it. Who cares if the others get it the first time? This is you. You need to find your own pace. Let's suppose you're studying a rule or a structure because you decided so, and you find it too difficult. You start getting anxious and feeling bad. Take a break, pause it, and move to something else. You can go back to the difficult part later. See, language does not have a rigid structure. You don't need to know A in order to understand B. You can learn B and then go back to A. It's your call. You and only you are in control of the language you learn. If they want you to read Shakespeare in class, but it's too difficult for you right now, don't read Shakespeare. Read something else. You can go back to Shakespeare when you feel ready. He'll understand. And perhaps the most important thing you can do to really relax yourself and make the most of your English learning is this. Think positively. If you work a little every day, no matter how little, you'll be better than yesterday. Stop thinking about all the things that you don't know about English today, but rather think about all the things that you didn't know before and you do now. Don't say, oh my God, there is so much I don't know about English today. I'm never gonna make it. It's impossible. But rather say, wow, I know a lot more things than yesterday. My pronunciation is so much better than last month. I can read things that I couldn't even dream of 3 months ago. I can understand a lot more than when I began. Think of all you have accomplished and you will realize that you are doing just fine. And finally, to close this principle, I want to say one more thing. Everybody has to go through the same process, the same stages when learning a new language. In the beginning, all people were clueless about the new language, but they all went through the same stages. Some people faster, some others slower, but we've all been there. Getting anxious or worried is not gonna change anything. Don't rush it. Take a big breath and relax. That'll be it for the principle number 6. Take it easy. I really hope that if you were feeling bad about your English learning, you feel better now. Believe me, when it comes to language learning, it's all about the attitude. Keep a positive outlook and get ready to take your English to the next level. I want to help you do that. We're in this together. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you in 2 days for the next principle. See you then.